And we go now to Ali Fortescue for more details on that. I mean, this is basically senior doctors saying, what's the point of these million antibody tests the government's bought?
Morning, Adam. I believe I'm on here to talk to you about Robert Jenrick, so I'll tell you a little bit about that, if that's okay. This is the Housing Secretary who is accused of rushing through a deal on a housing, high-rise housing blocks in East London after sitting next to a Tory donor at a dinner. And those texts and emails that were revealed yesterday, which have really fueled his critics, plenty of people from the Labour Party saying that he rushed that through to help a Tory donor avoid a big tax bill. I just spoke to one former cabinet minister who said the decision on Jenrick's part was naive. But the Prime Minister is standing by his housing secretary, saying that he should carry on, should not lose his job. Obviously, you know, after the Cummings saga a few weeks ago, it'd be interesting to see how far the Prime Minister goes to defend another person in his close circle. But for now, the front bench of the Conservatives are not breaking rank. And I think until that happens, I think it is very unlikely that we will see Robert Jenrick go. But it does put him in quite a difficult position, potentially, when the next reshuffle happens. Let's have a quick listen to what Nadine Zahawi, who is a business minister, had to say about this a little earlier on today.
What Robert Jenrick wanted to do, rightly, is build more homes in London. By the way, the Labour Mayor of London has to make a decision on the percentage of affordable homes and the viability of any scheme. You've got to make sure these schemes are built rather than just talked about. You know, it's a disgrace that boroughs like Tower Hamlets Planning Committee have to close early because there's lack of business. We need more homes built. It's only right that they are built. Robert Jenrick's absolute energy and focus is on getting more homes built. This matter, I think, has now been laid to rest.
We're saying this is not the first controversy that has surrounded the Housing Secretary. You'll remember he was on the front pages previously after people suspected him of breaking lockdown rules when he went to his home in Herefordshire. He also has been in a bit of controversy surrounding planning application granted at the Jockey Club in Surrey. And yesterday he was in the Times over another planning application round to do with an extension to his own home. So plenty of controversy surrounding the Housing Secretary. As I say, the Prime Minister has said he will be standing by him, but I think whatever way you look at it, having a Secretary of State on the front pages of most of the national papers this morning does not look particularly good.
Well, thank you for that, and apologies for the confusion. Well, joining me now is the Councillor for Tower Hamlets, Andrew Wood. He resigned from the Conservative Party in protest over the case. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Councillor Wood. The Cabinet Secretary says the Prime Minister says the matter is now closed. What do you say?
I think that's a mistake. The documents that were released last night were extremely interesting, and they just raised new questions and new concerns about the Minister's decision.
What is your particular concern as a councillor in the area affected?
So it's very clear from the documents released last night and the text messages that both the planning inspector and Jenrick's own officials both agreed unanimously and very clearly that he should reject the planning application. He chose to override both sets of advice to actually approve it. And what was very interesting is that the minister was concerned about the viability of the scheme, the payment of the £45 million of community infrastructure levy, but nobody else in the department seemed to have those concerns. So in the report to him, his officials don't even, talk about this as being an issue or being a viability or a concern. And actually later on, they even actually make a mistake about describing the SIL. So it's very clear that his officials were not particularly concerned about this £45 million, but the minister was. And where did he get those concerns from? I have to assume he got them directly from Desmond, and the text messages show that as well.
What do you think should happen now? Are you saying Mr. Jenrick should resign, or there should be a public inquiry or something?
So I started off with having this big hole in the story that I could not understand, and I've been doing lots of work to understand why he made that decision. And last night we had a lot more information, but there are still some holes. And I don't think there's been full disclosure of all of the evidence yet by the minister or the ministry. So there'll be new FOIs that kind of go in. And part of the problem is that this fundraising dinner, which we now know happened on the 18th of November, every time the minister talks about it or other people talk about the dinner, more information comes into the public domain. So it started off as, the minister shut down the conversation immediately. And now we know that they talked about the local plan. We now know that don't know for how long, but that Jenrick watched the video of the scheme. They exchanged phone numbers. They agreed to have a meeting, which was agreed a couple of days later to have that meeting on site in December. And then later that evening, Robert Jenrick initiates a text message conversation with Richard Desmond. None of those fit his earlier description in National Newspaper in May of having shut down the conversation immediately. So what else was discussed at that dinner that's not yet in the public domain?
What friends of Mr. Jenrick are saying is that the £12,000 donation by Richard Desmond to the Conservative Party was neither here nor there. It's a relatively very small amount. But they're saying his true concern was to make sure that houses needed in Tower Hamlets were built, or homes rather. What do you say to that?
So I agree with the comments about the £12,000. I don't think that's a material sum of money, given that the total value of the scheme was over £1 billion. But I disagree about the sort of need to build houses. Yes, we need to build houses, but we also need to make sure that the right percentage of affordable homes is being delivered. And what's kind of been missed in this conversation is that Desmond originally offered 35% of those new homes to be affordable. This is back in 2018. And then in June 2019, he dropped that offer from 35 down to 21%. And that drop of 14% in affordable homes was broadly equivalent to an additional benefit to Richard Desmond of about £40 million. So the total benefit to Richard Desmond from this decision was approximately £85 million in total. And the minister, again, didn't really deal with that issue either. And what we really wanted, well, actually, we didn't particularly want the bigger scheme, but if we were to have a bigger scheme, then it should have paid the £45 million a SIL and should also have delivered 35% affordable housing. And the school, as other sites in the area approved in 2019 did as well. Other sites are doing this. They're paying the SIL and the 35%. Why not this site as well? What was different about it?
Why do you believe Mr. Jenrick did it?
So again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it was at £12,000, as I just said. But the text message communications would suggest that the minister was trying to build a personal relationship with Richard Desmond, who obviously is a very influential figure who meets lots of people. Why the minister would want to build that kind of relationship just before he's making a decision on the planning application, I don't know. You'll have to ask the minister about that.
Okay, and just finally, what is the status of the development now? This is obviously a big and important site.
So actually, a lot of the work has already happened because this site got planning permission back in 2016 for a smaller scheme approved by Sir Ed Lister, who was then working for Boris Johnson. So they've already demolished the site. They've already dug the basement. They've done lots of work like utility connections, but it has slowed down while I wait for what's happening next.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Wood, joining us, independent councillor, former Conservative.